Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from football to the NBA, college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. This Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN in Miami, Florida, it's the Orange Bowl, the semifinal of the college football playoff. Penn State versus Notre Dame, two blue blood programs coming together and two teams that are very, very similar. As of the time of this recording, Penn State is +2 in the spread, according to our friends at BetOnline. This really feels like it could go either way. And at the same time, this is a meeting of teams that haven't come together since 2007. And Justin, you and I have our individual experiences of that game in 2007. That was the first official whiteout at Penn State, at Beaver Stadium. Now, there were whiteouts, but this was the first one where it was like, we're officially doing a whiteout, that sort of thing. I was a true freshman in the stands, in the student section, painted up like an absolute idiot, having the time of my life. We spelled out Luck of the Lion, a little play on Luck of the Irish there. Saw Derek Williams run back that touchdown right in front of my face. It was incredible. You picked off Jimmy Clausen in one of the final nails in the coffin there in the fourth quarter. That was such an electric atmosphere. You played in the game in 06. You played in the game in 07 against Notre Dame. What memories come back to you when you saw that this matchup was coming back around?
I mean, it's a nostalgic type of matchup just in general, right? Because I think when you think of college sports, there's different, there's like personalities. We talk about the Power Five and the Blue Bloods and all these different type of things. But when you get into like recruiting, you know, you start breaking down the characteristics or the profile of schools a little bit more, I gotta say, like a little bit more critically, right? So like just who you recruit against, the type of player. You talk about 50-50 schools, guys that look for guys like for players that are looking for overall development, 60-40 guys, or it's like more football, whatever the case may be. Penn State and Notre Dame always seem to line up in terms of a little bit of the profile, right? But they have a little bit more of a arrogance thing to them. So like that was always even the case through like the recruiting process or even getting into recruiting. Like we always recruited a lot of the same type of guys, you know, good profile, you know, of recruit. So it was always interesting, you know, from the recruiting trail. So now to see it on the field, it's twofold. I mean, I remember playing against those guys in 06 when they whooped us up there in a pretty bad butt whooping. But I remember we took it back out on them the next year when we got the whiteout and they came back to Beaver Stadium. And again, we're going to expect a physical, big, fast, I say fast, like fast enough team that's well coached and a lot of older players. That's typically the Notre Dame makeup, right? Or it's just like a lot of grown men playing disciplined, hard-nosed football. And it should be a matchup that I think we do well in. I think we got to create some space and get the speed going. But it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting. Then we think about the Orange Bowl. That goes back to the 05 comparison. So here we are.
So many memories coming back for Jay King. I love it. And the over-under for this game at the time of this recording, according to our friends at BetOnline, is 46. I do expect the under in this one. I expect it to be a low-scoring, knuckle-dragging, rock fight, that type of game, because it's just two very similar teams. I want to start with Penn State's defense up against Notre Dame's offense. The biggest question going into this game is, will Abdul Carter be able to play for Penn State? And if he does play, how healthy is he? You've seen a lot of stuff on social media. Abdul Carter putting out the Darth Vader content, making it seem like he's getting himself ready to do this thing, which is awesome and encouraging, at least for fans, and some fodder there. James Franklin has said all the right things and not, confirming that he's going to play nor denying that he's going to play. And why would you? Why would you tip your cap in advance of this game? You're going to let Notre Dame think about this and worry about it up until the very last second. But we did see how in the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State, once Abdul Carter was out of the lineup, which was somewhere in the second quarter and then obviously out for the second half, the defense looked markedly different for Penn State. It was obviously still good enough to get themselves a win. I am very impressed with the way Amin Vanover played and stepped up. Smith Vilbert as well. Dennis Sutton played his tail off, banged up there at the end of that game. So, see how that fares for Dennis Sutton. I imagine he's going to be good to go for the Orange Bowl. But again, everybody keeping their cards close to the vest. From what you've heard or what you understand about Abdul Carter, how do you feel about what he can be in the Orange Bowl, if he can go at all?
I mean, if he can play, I think he's an X factor just being on the field, because you have to account for him, right? So regardless of if he's a decoy or if he's at 75, 80%, I think it's a great opportunity to still contribute to the team. With that being said, I mean, you never really know. They keep the injuries close to the vest, especially in college, without mandatory injury reports. But I anticipate him playing. I think there's a pretty big matchup, semifinals, first college football playoff, pretty competitive guy. I mean, again, somebody that really increases the ceiling of that defense, and with just the things that they can do, being able to spy on the back end, being able to blitz. And again, even him at 80% is better than 90% of players on the field.
And it's the one thing that I find so interesting when marquee players, not just high profile players, but game changing players, are in a situation where they're able to play, but they're not 100%. Are they more of a hindrance to their team than they are a help? You use the word decoy. I think that's a great example. That can be more useful, it feels like, when it comes to offensive skill position players, because you'll get at least those early looks where the defense is maybe trending towards that guy. But for somebody like Abdul Carter playing a critical position like defensive end, Penn State's very best pass rusher, who will have opportunities against these tackles from Notre Dame, who had some trouble with the pass rush from Georgia throughout the game in the Sugar Bowl. So I'm curious to see, A, how much of a pass rush Penn State is able to get with just their front four. Do you think they're able to get there with Abdul being who knows what percent healthy? And do you think Tom Allen has to dial up a little bit more in terms of bringing additional guys and being more creative with blitz packages, as opposed to just relying on the front four to get home?
Well, I think it depends on where they put Abdul. I think one of the dynamic pieces that he provides is that, like, right, depending on what the injury is or what his limitations are. When I say decoy, it's like, I mean, he can be a gap run stopper if they're just kind of running the ball up the middle and they need him to move there. And it's not as much open field running per se, and it's like in his box and being able to stay close course in terms of just movement and staying within the box, versus playing on the end or in space where he might not be as healthy. So, like, I mean, there's just different areas in just his game that you can, I want to say, hide any of the deficiencies or injuries, but he's just that dynamic of a player. So, like, with that, I mean, just depending on if it's like a physical injury, yeah, maybe he can still pass rush and do what he needs to do from a finesse standpoint. And if it's more of a skill type of injury or extremity, like, let's see if he can, like, get physical, because I think Notre Dame is going to really come out and really try to establish the line of scrimmage and their physical dominance over Penn State. I think that's the type of game we're looking at, like a 17-21 type of matchup. And, he fits in a lot of different places. I do believe they could still get pass rush or, like, pressure on Notre Dame, but I think that really depends on how the game goes. We've seen that really hasn't opened up for the defense until we've kind of taken over a healthy lead, maybe at least 10 points or a possession or two up on the team, to where, the defense can really get after them. But we really haven't been I would say aggressive from a blitzing standpoint, but, like, that just hasn't been the case on just like a first, second down basis of blitzing, like, consistently. You know what I mean? So I think it's really going to depend on how Notre Dame brings their game to us. But when the opportunity presents itself, I think we can still get some pressure on that talented Notre Dame offensive line.
Talented Notre Dame offensive line. For Abdul Carter, it was a left shoulder injury, is what it looked like. At least we can't confirm that because, to your point, no injury reports have come out. But that was what the medical staff was attempting to work on when he was on the sidelines against Boise State. It looked like his left arm was kind of limp at his side. So is that a dislocated shoulder? Is it a separated shoulder? Is it a break? Is it something worse than that? Who knows? But that's for him to figure out. And then I guess my last question on Abdul. Considering it certainly looked like a left shoulder injury, is that something, well, if he was attacking a left tackle, is that more of a problem for him coming with that being his inside shoulder as opposed to, let's say he's going after the right tackle and he's almost protecting that wing?
I mean, it depends on what type of injury it is, right? Like if it's a rotator cuff or something that's rotational and he can't move his arm,
Can't swim.
I think that can be an issue if you're like talking about rotating it. But if it's just like a bone contusion, like that hurts, like a bone bruise on your shoulder hurts very bad, or an AC sprain, which is more, again, that brute force type of injury, or a traumatic type of injury from just like a brute force. I think you can like shoot that up and play through that and do what you need to do from that standpoint. So it's just depending on what type of shoulder injury he actually had. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And we are not doctors, so we'll leave it at that.
Nope.
Notre Dame offensively, it feels similar but different to Penn State. Like both teams are good at running the football. Both teams are committed to playing a physical style of offense, but it just presents in different ways. There's a number of tailbacks that Notre Dame can get involved. Jeremiah Love is certainly the highest profile running back that they have, and he is a load to bring down. And he's not necessarily Nick Singleton with that type of ability where he can take it 60 at any time. It's more of a war of attrition with Notre Dame in their running game, is that they're just going to try and wear you down, and they will get their big breaks to have explosives here and there. The outlier with them, which is something very different than what Penn State has experienced in the 2024 season, is a mobile quarterback that the opposing team is prepared to give him dedicated running plays, maybe 10 to 15 times a game. Riley Leonard, as a passer, is serviceable, is competent. So if Penn State's able to put the passing game on him, they could have some success in that. However, it's that challenge of, if you have a dedicated running quarterback, then you have that advantage of 10 hats versus whomever Penn State is putting in the box potentially. From your experience as a player and then also watching this team, how they played this year, how do you handle that type of threat?
Just loading up the box.
No, especially a running quarterback where it can just be a direct snap and he's taking it whichever way they decide.
I mean, you treat it just like I would say like an under center quarterback and a dot I back, right? Where it's just more downhill run. So you kind of make those adjustments and move from, gap assignment football from that standpoint. I mean, especially when the threat of throwing the ball is limited. So it's like it kind of directs where you need to put your efforts. So anytime you have a wildcat situation or putting a quarterback, you treat him as if he's like a tailback in an I formation. So it's not too much. Yeah, it's just not too much of an adjustment.
Leonard was the leading rusher for Notre Dame against Georgia in the quarterfinal. Now, not all of that came off design quarterback runs. Leonard is very good about extending the play, getting outside the pocket. He just had some timely runs against the Bulldogs to keep Notre Dame alive. And it's very similar. I think he's more mobile than Drew Aller, but we've talked about how Drew Aller's legs have been such a boost for this offense this year, in the same ways that Drew is able to extend a play and maybe get a first down handful of times or even a rushing touchdown here and there. It just changes the elements that the defense has to be aware of. So my question to you is, do you expect there to be a dedicated spy for Riley Leonard from Penn State's defense? And if so, who would you be looking at as like, this guy's the perfect candidate?
Yeah, potentially, but I think that would be Abdul, right? At the end of the day, when you talk about, again, even like a shoulder injury, being able to run somebody down and make a tackle, I think he can still do that and be a force in that standpoint if it's going to mitigate just a complete, avenue of their offense. So it's I would say Abdul. I mean, Kobe King's been playing tremendous football all year, right? And he's just been playing like a man with his head on fire, and I love it. So I mean, he's another candidate. I mean, Tony Rojas, all those guys are athletic enough to do that job, but obviously when you put All-American on there, kind of nullifies plus those type of situations.
Dom DeLuca also jumps to mind as a guy who is strong enough yet nimble enough to bring down a guy like Riley Leonard, who's a bigger dude, but still able to run with him. And Dom DeLuca's been awesome throughout this playoff run, so a lot of credit to him. Jalen Reed, somebody at safety who dinged up against Boise State. He's had his bumps and bruises throughout the season. Not entirely sure if he's the guy to be doing that. You might want to utilize him more in pass coverage, but we'll see. I think this is a good matchup for Penn State defensively. Just the big question mark is Abdul Carter, because you wonder how far you can afford to go down the depth chart, not just at defensive end, but across this defensive line. Penn State's had a lot of success with what you and I have talked about, that symbiotic relationship between the secondary and the front four. If it weren't for the way that the secondary is played this year, you don't see as many coverage sacks and coverage tackles for loss as Penn State has been able to rack up. So I think I've been on the record as that I've seen better Penn State secondaries, but this is still a really good Penn State secondary, and they complement each other very well. If Abdul Carter is, again, not close to 100%, then the question becomes, deny Dennis Sutton. What are you going to do? Amin Vanover, what are you going to do? Smith Vilbert. Max Granville is somebody that you and I have talked about in the past, and that he was supposed to be part of the class of 2025. He reclassified, came in as a class of 2024 guy, and now he's considered the third down backup to Abdul Carter at defensive end. Running about 250 pounds for a true freshman is no small thing. So that could be a point where Notre Dame looks at it and is like, oh, there's an opportunity with a kid who has very little experience, but it does create a new variable for Notre Dame to have to get used to. And I think you can't gloss over the fact that Penn State has talent at defensive tackle, but a lack of depth because of injuries, the departure of Akeem Beeman, Caleb Artis, Alonzo Ford, guys that have gone down. Like, it's not a situation where I expect Penn State to be gassed at those positions, but it is a question mark as these playoffs wear on. And that's, as you know, that's normal. It's freaking January. We've never experienced this 12-team playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty, cool situation. I mean, especially now getting down to the Final Four, and and the games are getting better. And then when we think about that, there's no perfect, system at this moment. I mean, unless you just want to, take out the exemptions and things of that nature. But I think this Final Four is a nice storyline, even when you think of cash versus coaching and culture. When you think of one side being Ohio State and Texas, the highest two paid collectives or alumni bases, and then you have the other two essentially coaching and culture, I would say, between Notre Dame and Penn State, where they're not in the top 10 in spending or 15 in spending, and they're still in that top four. So it's an interesting development of what's the proper blueprint on building a program moving forward, especially when we got money invested into these guys, revenue sharing coming over the next couple of years, and it's really split 50-50. So I think that's really the cool storyline to pay attention to throughout this playoff season.
It's amazing. It's like none of the teams that got first round buys advance. None of the conference champions advance. I've liked it because the teams that are here earned it. And that's what we were all looking for, right? Is the teams that, it's the deserving versus best BS from Kirk Herbstreit, but it's like, hey, the most deserving teams, the teams that earned it, are in the semifinal. Let's flip.
True. No, I mean, they won the games, right? They won the games. You can talk about the seeding. They won the games. Let's go.
All right, Penn State football fans, this is a potential championship year, which could be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and there's nothing better than sharing it together as a family. And that's what Future Fans Sports is all about. Future Fans is a new brand that helps little kids become big football fans through storybook-led activity boxes. What makes Future Fans unique? It introduces the core concepts of a sport in ways that make sense to a kid. For example, instead of explaining something like downs in football directly, there's a beanbag toss game that has things like 4 tries and 6 points embedded into it, and then later, the storybook connects that to football. It's absolutely genius. Head to futurefans.com right now and check it out. It's only $49.99, and you can get a 15% off discount with the code Penn State, all one word, PENNSTATE. That's $49.99 at futurefans.com, and you can get 15% off with the discount code Penn State, all one word. Let this be the opportunity to have your kid fall in love with football and the Nittany Lions. State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Let's flip to Penn State's offense against Notre Dame's defense. Penn State has run the ball very well in its last 3 games. However, Notre Dame's defense will present a far greater problem than anybody that Penn State has played in its last 3 games. Playing against Oregon's defense in the Big Ten championship game, Penn State had nearly 300 yards rushing. SMU, Boise State a better defense than I think a lot of people gave them credit for, and get a lot of respect for what they did against Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl. I think they presented a much stronger challenge than SMU's defense. I think that's clear. But Penn State, 3 consecutive games, they run the ball very, very well. My sincere hope is to see Andy Kotelnicki stick to that, kind of stick to the quote-unquote vanilla stuff. But if anything, I see an opportunity for Penn State to really take advantage with the interior of its offensive line against the interior of Notre Dame's defense, notably their defensive line. Their star defensive tackle, Riley Mills, went out in the first round in the victory against Indiana. He's lost for the season. So there's a lack of depth there, a lack of size there as well. And that's exactly where Penn State has its size and strength along this defensive line. Not necessarily bad tackle play for Penn State this year. I think that was a question mark coming into the season. Drew Shelton's been steady. Nolan Rucci has played well ever since Anthony Donko went down. But you've got monsters in the interior of this offensive line for Penn State with Vega Ioane, Nick Dawkins, and Sal Wormley. If you were drawing up the offense and you're in Andy Kotelnicki's shoes, how would you attack this Notre Dame defense?
I mean, I think you have to get on edges, right? I think it's a big physical defense, experienced defense. I know they took on a lot of transfers that are a little older. So they're going to be sound running straight at them. I think you have to get them uncomfortable and on their heels a little bit, whether it's a little bit of misdirection, like even when we came out against USC, where you say it looked a little gimmicky, maybe hit them with a little rope-a-dope and then punch them in the mouth, right? Get back to the identity. But I think you just got to get them a little off balance at the beginning, because it's like, I think I'm just a more physical statured, understanding their roles, and just got to get them a little uncomfortable and attack them again on their edges and not straight up.
And there was something plenty of fans raised questions about in terms of the play calling from Andy Kotelnicki in the second and third quarter against Boise State. Penn State came out firing in the first quarter and really salted away the game in the fourth quarter, running the football extremely well. It was a little gimmicky in the second and third quarter, and James Franklin and Kotelnicki have talked about it since and saying they saw opportunities and they wanted to try and take advantage of them. I don't believe this coaching staff calls plays looking to make an emotional statement necessarily. I believe they do everything with a plan or because they see an opening to do so. However, my thought, again, coming back to that potential weakness in the interior of Notre Dame's defensive line, is do you see a lot more big boy football from Penn State than they've already put on tape this year? I'll use it for instance. We've seen Cooper Cousins, an offensive lineman, line up at fullback, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember if that was the Boise State game or the SMU game, but seen that situation out there. You got 3 or 4 tight ends you're comfortable trotting out there. Katron Allen runs the ball like a battering ram. So is it something where you see the Teague brought back a little bit more? Is it something where Drew's under center a little bit more play action, leather helmet football?
I mean, getting late into the playoffs, I think it's going to be, a customized game plan. You might see those things, right? I mean, just in terms of what's going on. But I think on the edges, I mean, this is a game for Trey Wallace to kind of show out, even though they have some pretty good DBs on Notre Dame's sidelines. I think, opening up the run game, if we can get that reduction out of Katron and Nick like we have been, man, it just makes it a lot easier on everybody else. And I mean, the X factor, obviously, Tyler Warren attacking the middle of the field. create some mismatches. They're just, again, thinking, getting them on their heels and making sure that, the play calling. And then when you say making emotional decisions, I think there's a lot to do with play calling and making an emotional statement, because it is a level of moxie and confidence of like, all right, either I'm going to come right at you like this, I'm going to make you think this and do that, or it's just like, all right, you're not going to change your defensive scheme. I'm going to keep attacking you like this until you quit or until you make this adjustment, and then we're going to come at you like this. So I think everything in football is somewhat emotional from that standpoint, right? You have the analytics, it's the science and the art out there, and that emotion of the art is pretty intricate, and especially in play calling. That's why I said at one point, when I evaluate offensive coordinators based on a personality, because when it gets into those crunch times, you understand, like, whether it's the hubris or the arrogance, whatever you want to say, or maybe it's just the lack of confidence or insecurity to make certain calls in certain situations. But I think emotion goes into a lot of it when it comes to defensive, offensive coordinating football games.
I think Andy can be aggressive. I think he maybe in the Boise State game just saw some opportunities and was like, we can really put these guys in a blender. And credit to Boise State. They played good defense there in the second and third quarter. They nearly got themselves back into it, but Penn State was able to put it away in the end. I think there's the question to be asked here. You talked about Tyler Warren. One, how does Notre Dame defend Tyler Warren? Their star defensive back, Xavier Watts, was in and out of the lineup against Georgia. He is somebody that is expected to be following Tyler Warren, but is that enough? We saw against Ohio State and against Oregon, people doubling Tyler Warren, playing man across the board. I thought that was an outstanding point you just made about Trey Wallace, Harrison Wallace potentially having a breakout game. Penn State could use it from a wide receiver and not just, Omari Evans catching one or two passes, one of them being a touchdown. Great performance against Boise State, but can you do it to the tune of 4 or 5, maybe 6 receptions and really help Penn State open things up? I think that's going to be a difference in this game, because if Notre Dame's game plan is to sell out for the run and make Drew Aller extremely uncomfortable and make him throw the football 25, 30, 35 times, that could be a challenge. I'm not saying that's something Drew Aller can't overcome. The USC game that you're talking about is a data point where that game was largely on Drew Aller and Tyler Warren, and Penn State was able to come out with that in overtime. So if you're looking at Drew Aller for this offensive game plan against Notre Dame, strengths and weaknesses for him going into this Orange Bowl game.
Strengths, I think, again, from a more, I'm not going to say stagnant defense, but just going against those guys, they're just bigger. I say, again, not less athletic, because they were very athletic. They're a very big, athletic group. Like at every, that's what I'm saying. But at every prerequisite level, like, they have everything. Like, they check all boxes. Like, they're a very solid football team. So just across the board. But with that, I don't think they have any like extraordinary, players on defense that can kind of disrupt what he has going on. So I think as long as he kind of plays his game and gets into that flow where he's become somewhat of a gunslinger, those are his opportunities, I think, in a game like this, to even show to the national audience of like what he's made of. Because like the way he's playing, I mean, in the playoffs and regardless of the matchups, I mean, he's putting he's driving his value a lot for next year and even going into the draft. So I think him being able to do that against Notre Dame is going to be critical. Just extending plays, moving out the spot, and just continuing his progression as a quarterback for Penn State.
To me, this game is going to be defined by field position, time of possession, and turnovers. Whoever makes more mistakes in the turnover department is probably going to lose this thing. I know that's not a shocking revelation about football, but still, these are two teams that are pretty safe with the football. So the margin of error is extremely thin. Time of possession for two teams that like to run the football. How much can you keep Notre Dame's offense off the field? Not that it's a tremendous threat to score. They were able to take advantage of the middle eight there in a special teams play against Georgia and really take control of that game. So you have to play extremely sound in all three phases of the game. And every single yard, as I talked about with field position, is going to be critical. So those decisions you make in terms of analytics, when to punt, when to go for it, when to kick field goals, when to take the points, when are points at a premium, all those decisions are going to be heightened, even more critical in this. And I think that brings me to my final point in terms of this is such a cool coaching matchup. Marcus Freeman, 3 years at Notre Dame, already has him now in the semifinal of the college football playoff, has done such a wonderful job you talked about with the culture. Not to say that it was bad under Brian Kelly, but there's a certain stigma about the way that Brian Kelly coaches. And it felt like Marcus Freeman moved Notre Dame into the future and is guiding them in the right direction. His decisions against Georgia, a lot of people are talking about when they platooned their punt team off the field and got their offense on the field and really messed up Georgia in that game. It was a brilliant coaching call. On the opposite side, James Franklin, now 10 years at Penn State. This is the opportunity Penn State fans have been dying for since the 80s. And this is the opportunity James Franklin and the entire staff have been grinding for a decade. James Franklin, I'd be the first person to acknowledge that I have concerns about him when it comes to those critical decisions in games, because we've seen that for the bulk of his tenure, but at least this season, it's looked to have been improved, and Penn State has the answers for those questions when it comes to 4th and short. Do you punt? What's the field position? The critical decision with the Luke Reynolds fake punt rush against Minnesota to extend that drive and ultimately ice the game for Penn State in Minneapolis. There's proof of progress there. But Franklin versus Freeman, I think, is going to be extremely critical for all the reasons I just mentioned: field position, time of possession, and turnovers. What are your feelings about this matchup between two very good coaches?
I mean, I think one is a historical matchup, right? When you talk about two African-American coaches getting a chance to eventually coach in a national championship game. That's something that even if you ever worked under Coach Franklin, like that is a big selling point to even recruits that's one of his dreams, right? So like helping him accomplish his dream. So I think that's a cool thing to begin with. But again, that side, interestingly, being the coaching and culture side of the whole equation, where there are two coaches that kind of got to this point where they didn't have the big money donors or those different types of things, very nurtured ecosystems and strong support systems between Notre Dame and Penn State, kind of representing the old guard of college football, and then you have Ohio State and Texas representing the new guard in the sense of how things are operating behind the scenes, which is pretty interesting, and those two being led by African-American coaches. But when we get onto the field of the X's and O's, I think just their philosophies are similar, and like their makeup is similar. Both former players, one a linebacker, one a quarterback, and just seeing, having different career ceilings, but both, coming as players and transitioning into prominent roles at these universities, I think is extremely cool and needs to be highlighted and show guys and players that, hey, there's a future in working in the business if you understand the ins and outs and really attack this profession like the expert that you are.
I can't wait for this game. This is something a long time coming for Penn State football fans. I'll be the first to say I don't know if I ever expected Penn State to be in the Final Four of the playoff in this 2024-2025 campaign. So this is just a wonderful opportunity against Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl in the semifinal of the college football playoff this Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN in Miami. The winner of this game moves on to face the winner of Ohio State and Texas in the national championship game. This is really surreal for Penn State fans. I hope you all enjoy the game. We'll have a full recap for you right here on State of State. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.